All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a massive question today, one that really underpins, well, everything. What happens to our food when the stable climate we've always taken for granted just disappears?
For generations, for millennia, farmers have been able to count on predictable seasons to grow the food that we all eat. But that predictability, it's starting to vanish. So today we're going to break down exactly how our changing climate is threatening the global food supply, and maybe more importantly, what the path forward could actually look like.
Okay, so let's dive right in. To really get a handle on what's at stake here, we first have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this challenge. We're talking about a global harvest that's under direct threat.
And you have to remember, at the very center of this story are people. We're talking about millions of farmers all over the world. Their livelihoods, and by extension, our food security, are right on the front lines of this changing climate.
And the economic impact? Whoa, it is absolutely staggering. That number you're looking at, $3.8 trillion. So what is that? Well, according to the World Wildlife Fund, that's the estimated value of all the crops and livestock we've lost to climate-driven disasters just in the last 30 years. That works out to something like $123 billion just vanishing every single year. And this right here, this shows you just how sensitive our most basic foods really are. For every single degree Celsius of global warming, we're seeing projected yield losses of 6% for wheat, more than 7% for maize, and over 3% for rice and soybeans. Now, these aren't just numbers on a screen. They represent a very real threat to the very foundation of what the world eats. Okay, so to make all these big global numbers feel a little more real, let's zoom in. Let's focus on just one of the world's most important grains. This is the story of rice, and it's a perfect example of how extreme heat is already changing our food. So take a look at this. What's so powerful here is the direct overlap. On the one hand, you've got the map of the major rice-producing regions in Southeast Asia. Then, layered right on top, you see these heat maps showing the projected increase in dangerously hot days. It's pretty clear, right? The world's rice bowl is literally becoming a hotspot. And the thing is, rice is incredibly sensitive to this kind of heat. I mean, research shows that just a 1 degree Celsius rise in the daily maximum temperature, that alone can cause a 10% drop in how much rice is harvested. Just think about that for a second. A tiny, tiny shift in the weather can have a massive, massive impact on the food supply. And this quote, it really lays out the chain reaction perfectly. See, extreme heat doesn't just mean you get less from your crops. It's a domino effect. As it says here, you get loss of usable farmland, it hurts the health of the farmers themselves, and it even makes more food spoil after it's been harvested. It's a shock to the entire system. So you might be wondering, how do we actually know all this? How can we predict it? Well, that brings us perfectly to our next section, forecasting our food future, and the incredible science of dealing with uncertainty. Okay, so for years now, scientists have been using these really complex models to try and project what's going to happen to our crops. Take this chart on wheat production, for example. All those different colored bands, they represent different climate scenarios. But look at how wide they are. There's a huge range of possible outcomes. And all that uncertainty, well, it makes it incredibly hard for policymakers to figure out which risks they should actually be preparing for. But that's starting to change. Scientists are now using some really cool next-generation tools, like something called a Bayesian hierarchical model. Yeah, I know, it sounds super complicated, but the idea behind it is actually revolutionary. Instead of just spitting out one prediction, it breaks down why the future is so uncertain. The analogy I love is a weather forecast that doesn't just say it might rain, but tells you, well, 70% of our uncertainty is because of the wind, and 30% is because of the temperature. It's a game changer. So what's the big deal? Well, the crucial shift here is moving from just knowing what might happen to understanding why our predictions are all over the place. As you can see, we can now separate the uncertainty that comes from the climate models from the uncertainty in the crop models. And here's the aha moment. This has shown us that a huge part of the problem is our own understanding of crop biology. And knowing that, well, that gives policymakers a much, much clearer target for where to put research and money. Okay, so now that we have this better information, we can start to build a more resilient future. So let's pull the lens back out and look at the path forward, which is all about adapting our food systems. All right, so experts pretty much agree that there are 3 core pillars to this transformation. First up, nature-positive production. Second, resilient supply chains. And third, sustainable and healthy diets. So let's break each of those down real quick. So nature-positive production, it starts right from the ground up. And I mean that literally. The whole idea is to farm with nature, not to fight against it. We're talking about things like agroecology, integrating ecological principles into farming, and regenerative agriculture, which is all about rebuilding the health of the soil. When you restore the ecosystem, you build a much stronger, more resilient food supply. And this really gets to the heart of it. Resilience isn't just one thing. It has to be built into the entire system. That means everything from improving storage and transportation to cut down on waste, all the way to smarter tech, like early warning systems for farmers. But it's not just about technology. It's also about protecting indigenous and local farming knowledge, investing in new heat-resistant crops, and even diversifying our own diets so we're not so reliant on just a few staples. You have to protect the system from every single angle. So, this brings us to the final and maybe most important question. What does all of this mean for you? What's on your plate? I think the core takeaway here is pretty clear. Securing our food future, well, it's not any one person's job. It's got to be a massive, coordinated effort. We need governments to set better policies, we need farmers on the ground implementing new practices, and we need communities and individuals making more sustainable choices. Because ultimately, the future of our food isn't some fixed destiny that's already been decided. It's a story that's still being written, and frankly, we are all the authors. So the question we're left with is, what will we choose to put on our plate?